Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how you can innovate faster by adopting the modern growth stack. I'm David Isquick, and I'm with Optimizely. Today, you're going to be hearing from three speakers. You'll be hearing from Brian Hickey, who leads growth at Cisco. He'll be providing expertise from over a decade of helping companies grow at scale. He'll talk to you through the overview of key solutions that are part of the modern growth stack. Next, you'll be hearing from Carter Foxgrover. He's a principal product manager at Amplitude, and he'll discuss how product analytics can help you grow your business. Finally, you'll be hearing from me, David Isquick, a senior product marketer at Optimizely, on how experimentation works together with analytics to help product people build better products. So a little housekeeping notes today. We will be recording today's presentation, and the slides will actually be sent out to you after the webinar is complete. And if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to submit those questions in the text box in your GoToWebinar control panel. One thing to note, since we have multiple speakers today, you're going to want to say who that question is in regards to so that the speaker knows that you're asking them that question. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I bring you Brian from Cisco. Cool. Looks like Brian's having a little trouble connecting. Brian, are you able to share your screen?
Yes, if you want, you can pass the ball to me. Oh, here we go. There we go. Thank you, David, for passing the ball over. Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Hickey, and I'm thrilled today to share with you how Cisco today is thinking about ways of developing the modern tech stack. This is definitely not a comprehensive list, but it's definitely some of the things that we're doing today at Cisco that have been adding tremendous value. And so a little bit about me. I've been doing growth for a while now. A lot of my growth experience started back in 2005 when I was working for a startup called Offermatica. Offermatica provided a very unique experience where we were one of the first enterprise level A/B testing solutions out there. We ended up doing very, very well in the US market. My boss came into my office and he asked me to expand into a London office where we ended up growing across the EMEA market. And then we ended up continuing to grow, ended up expanding into the Asia APAC market and developing an office in Japan. So what ended up happening for me personally is presented with an opportunity where I had a chance to talk to many different CMOs or CEOs about this notion of experimentation. Working with over 120 companies across the globe, I'm talking about this very topic. What type of technologies can we use, and what does that framework look like when you're talking about having this process adopt within a given organization? I ended up traveling the globe. I ended up coming home. I buy myself a cat, end up taking a breather and trying to figure out, what does this all mean? So as we transition from 2005, you'll notice that by the time that we get to 2018, where we are today, there's this transitional period, right? So there's more than just experimentation and testing stuff, right? So now there's this notion of growth where we go beyond just A/B testing buttons, but it's really about what kind of portfolio in terms of technologies can we utilize to really become experts in our end users. And when we talk about growth, there's many aspects of growth that we can talk about. There's the philosophical side. There's definitely the strategic sides and maybe how you're organizing your teams. But primarily, there's technologies and there's tactics, but in the realm of technologies is specifically what we're going to be talking about today. And as we start talking about growth tools, I always recommend, and the way that we kind of do things at Cisco, is we start with the customer journey. And the more that we kind of focus on this notion of the customer journey, we can start figuring out what parts of technologies are going to fit in what places. And oftentimes, you hear the notion of top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. And with that, we'll have some technologies that are inherently within those phases of a customer journey. So top of the funnel, we'll often be talking about this notion of marketing analytics, and we'll be going deeper into how we audit those analytics. And then as you kind of go down the maturity of the customer journey, we'll be talking about product analytics. This is a little more different in the sense of not necessarily page views or visitors, but in product behaviors and how our end users are using that given tool. And then if you do have the right integration set up, in an ideal world, you would like to have an experimentation framework running across your whole entire customer journey. And then the same would take place for user testing. And so we're talking about marketing analytics, and we've all been here before. Nobody here is a stranger to some of the pitfalls of marketing analytics, whether we're having an integration problem, or the tags don't seem to be firing right, or somebody might have a preference for Google Analytics versus Adobe Analytics, and there's ongoing burden of trust with your data. And one of the tools that have helped us in the past is ObservePoint. And ObservePoint provides this unique technology where you're able to audit the integrity of a given integration. Now, auditing an integration comes in many shapes and sizes. Namely, you're able to, one, just at a high level, understand if the actual tag is there. In a lot of cases, what will happen is you're having an integration that is completed. Maybe there's a redesign. Maybe your site uses SEO as a tactic, so you have thousands or even millions of pages out there that are residing on your domain. And this tool provides a very good way at an aggregate level, understanding what tags are missing on your page. You can download this information. I'll give you an inventory of those pages that are missing, and you can easily hand that off to your engineers to have them complete the integration. We recently launched a redesign. Our About page was missing a tag. It was missing for a few months, and it's tools like this that help us pinpoint the breakage in that integration. And then, aside from just getting an inventory of what tags are missing, you can get the double-click view in terms of what is going on with the tags that are actually integrated. This is very important in the sense of, if you have a tag that is integrated, is that tag firing? Are there duplicate tags on that page? Is there a scenario where you could be sending multiple requests because you have multiple tags? Or is there a scenario where the tag is actually there, but it's not firing? So again, this helps you understand the integrity of an integration, even though the tag might be there. And again, very easy to download this information, hand it off to your engineering team, and they can resolve the matter. So my other favorite insights that they provide is the page load times. Again, this provides the kind of 30,000-foot view of an aggregate way of you to understand what pages are the slowest on a given site. Again, very helpful in terms of SEO rankings and things of that nature to kind of make sure they have a healthy operating site. And then again, we know that most vendors are very picky about where a tag should reside on a given web page. So this is let you know in terms of at a high level where those tags are integrated, whether it's the top of the page or the middle of the page or the bottom of the page. So very, very helpful in terms of the positioning of where those tags might be. And one thing to note is that it doesn't really have to be one vendor solution. Whatever vendor solution you might have out here, ObservePoint is going to help you understand where the integrity of that given integration. So it could be Google Analytics, it could be some other third-party vendor, and they can help you out. And ultimately, one of the things that comes out from doing this audit is a score. The score is typically 1 through 100. So if you're getting a a 90 or 99, you can anticipate that's a pretty good integration. Anything below a 90, you're probably going to want to investigate with a little more detail. And ultimately, it gives you guidance on where you can improve your integration and have you feel a little bit more confident that the reports you're generating are things that you can know as a representation of reality instead of a misintegration. Now, as we transition from the top of the funnel, we will start to talk about things that are more of middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel. And this is how we transition from in-product behavioral analytics. So again, you can see that as we're talking about behavioral analytics, it really represents the other aspects of the customer journey. So again, we're breaking away from page views, we're breaking away from visitor counts, and we're really talking about when an end user is in the product experience, how are they using it? What are driving factors that are retaining them within the product experience, and being able to optimize that, or getting deeper insights to what that really means. And so with that, we love to leverage Amplitude. And Amplitude provides a lot of, just a wealth of information from the product side of things. And namely, and I'm going to talk about this funnel throughout the whole entire presentation, because there's just a tremendous value in the sense that they'll provide this double-click view of a given breaking point within a funnel that we had. So here you can see a great deal of drop-off is taking place, but what is going on exactly? So here we can kind of double click into where the drop-off is in this funnel and start investigating a little bit further. They call this view microscope, and it's something that we use all the time. And because of that, Amplitude ends up providing another value add, because they're in the product experience, this notion of retention. And with that, you'll also get what is your aha moment, because again, an end user is in the product experience, and what are the things they're going to be teasing out the user for those core behaviors to retain that end user in the product experience. Also product market fit, if you're in the startup phase or launching a new product in the market. So what are the things that are driving adoption within a given feature or a given product or a given company? And then also the North Star metrics. Again, just things that give you guidance to that are making your product successful. And another thing that we're going to transition to is Amplitude is a wealth of information in terms of surfacing new data to give us new A/B testing ideas. And the way that they're able to do this is, this is one of my favorite reports out of Amplitude, referred to as Compass. Now, what I like to do is kind of break this report into two chunks. You can focus on the left side, which is really just an inventory of the events that's taking place. Now, these events can be anything. It just depends on the structure of your given product. And then on the right side, you'll see how much these events are correlated to retention. So at a high level, I can't get into all the nuances of how to read this report, but at a high level, you can see that the darker colors have a stronger correlation to retention. The lighter colors have a less correlation to retention. So it gives you a high-level view of understanding what behaviors are driving adoption. And again, the events on the left are completely, think of them as variables. If you're Optimizely and you're looking to understand what is retention for people using that product, they might be interested in campaigns launched. If you are an e-commerce platform, you might be looking at product pages that are visited, and the list goes on and on. And so for us, we had a chance to look at these events and then look at retention and come up with A/B testing ideas. So if we know that maybe red messages is a strong correlation to retention, well, how can we get our end users to read more messages? And ultimately what ended up happening is it inspired us to come up with new A/B testing ideas. And because we have this integration with Amplitude, we can build out reports that you see here. So you have recipe A versus recipe B. And you can see that emphatically that there are some semblance, there's some attribution to a given experience leading an end user to read more messages. And because of that, we're retaining them more over time. So we were nevertheless thrilled about that. So now as we we kind of transition from the marketing analytics, we go to the end product behavioral analytics, and then we're talking about real end user testing. And this, in a perfect world, should try to go across the whole entire customer journey, so you can understand where do end users ultimately have a breakdown in terms of their experience. So what we ended up using is a company called UserTest.io. And UserTest.io is, very, very beneficial in the sense of, again, helping us out with this funnel. And it was a funny story because what's happening is we ended up seeing a big drop off, and we're like, okay, well, let's go do some user testing and understand a little bit more about what is going on with this given funnel. What we ultimately found out is that we had a button, we're offering a trial, and our end users were not able to actually click on the button. So it's like you had one job, the button did not work, and we couldn't quite figure out what was happening. Well, if you look at the whole story holistically, and the way that all the technologies were helping us out is that Amplitude was able to show us where the breakdown in the funnel was, and then user testing was able to help us what specifically was happening. So user testing was able to allow us to see an end user clicking on the button not working. We're able to communicate with that end user and understand that they had a very aggressive ad blocker installed that was preventing the DOM to render the button correctly and for it to actually function. So without these technologies working in harmony, we would never been able to understand what was one of the factors for that drop off in the funnel. And so as we kept on doing more user testing, we found out that this ad blocker was affecting a lot of our end users across the board. So we had to quickly surface this to our engineering team and ultimately get that button fixed. Now, we ended up trying to come up with a cadence and a way that we could do user testing and also make sure that we're getting the best value out of it. And one way that we did that is we tried to make sure we're doing it weekly or monthly and stay consistent, and then also make sure that we're documented appropriately. So making sure that we create summary videos, put it in a Jira or wiki, and capture screenshots, and ultimately make sure that when something needs to be fixed, that the engineering work could consume it and fix it appropriately. So ultimately, what we ended up doing is, as we talk about experimentation and as we talk about Amplitude, one of the amazing things today is that, Optimizely started in the top of the funnel. But today, what we're finding out is that we can do experimentation across the whole entire customer journey. So it's no more just A/B testing of the landing page experience, but now we can enter the product experience. And with the use of full stack, it really presents a great opportunity where you can start doing code level experimentation. You're no longer hindered by technology to actually do experimentation. And you can, there's just a wealth of ways that you can go about doing experimentation, whether it's personalization or recommendations from the top end of the funnel, or maybe if you want to do mobile native experimentation. So we're really presented with an opportunity by leveraging Optimizely to experiment across the whole entire customer journey. And the thing is, we weren't able to do that just a few years ago. And now that we can, it really presents an opportunity for us to become even better experts in our end users. Now with that, as Optimizely and Amplitude, today they're working in parity. Optimizely helps us rotate the given experience, and Amplitude helps us provide the robust analytics that we didn't have before. So what we end up doing is, as we change a given experience, we can pass that recipe level information into Amplitude, and Amplitude surfaces, a retention cord you see here. Now, I always like to pause on a graph like this because, guys, like we were not able to do this just a few short years ago. So the fact that we can do this today is incredible. This is net new and extremely, extremely valuable within our organization. So it's great to see that technologies of this nature are working in parity so we can do things as amazing as this. So again, just, I could go on and on about this all day, but I can't. I'm going to have limited time. But I did want to iterate that, these are some of the things that we are doing at Cisco today. And if you look at the customer journey, you can see that there are ways that these different tech stacks can work together in harmony to make us better experts in our own end users. And I think that in principle, that no matter where you are in your business, the technologies of this nature can have tremendous value. You're welcome to stay in touch with me. My website is brian.taiwan. You can reach me at gmail.com as well. And next, we have Carter Foxgrover, who will be presenting on all things Amplitude. He's a tremendous wealth of information. And Carter, I am going to hand it to you.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks for that rundown. It's pretty exciting to see what Cisco's been doing in the last couple of days, or I should say months at this point. So I'm going to be talking about basically drilling one step deeper into part of what Brian was talking about, which is the role of product analytics. And I want to try and explain more about the role and how you use that as part of a growth stack, and then really help you understand what is the value of those deeper insights that you can get from product analytics. And ultimately, it's in pursuit of helping you grow your business. And so the fundamental thesis is by better understanding what your users are doing in your product and how those tie to the valuable outcomes you care about, you're going to be able to drive growth. So very quickly, some background on Amplitude. We've been around for 4 years now, so that classic startup trajectory. We're a large startup at this point, backed by big Silicon Valley venture capitalists. We've had, fortunately, a lot of success in helping a lot of companies all over the world. So over 5,000 companies now, looking at 20,000 plus products. And so we're ingesting a lot of information, and we're really helping all of these companies understand what their users are doing, making it very easy to ask valuable questions so that they can figure out potential drivers of growth and execute on those understandings. Here's just a sense for the many different types of industries that are finding value in product analytics as they drive their growth processes. And the thing to understand is that you look at all these different businesses and all these different industries, and there's one thing that binds all of them together, which is they have had a lot of success when they are best aligned with their customers and their users. And so they leverage product analytics and Amplitude and this growth stack that we're talking about in order to do that. A tremendous number of these brands on this board, and then many that we can't actually fit on the page, are using this full stack that Brian is talking about, from the top of the funnel with marketing analytics and marketing auditing to product analytics and that sort of mid to late stage of the funnel and understanding what your customers are doing. And then they're executing, they're using Optimizely to drive these experiments. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about product analytics. The context for this in a growth scenario is that the best brands in the world we've seen that have had just tremendous growth in the last couple of years have adopted effectively a scientific process, and it's an optimization cycle where they derive insights from their analytics. Brian showed the example of the funnel and what they could do to better improve the onboarding flow. And that shows you where your gaps are, or conversely, it helps you identify the opportunities to drive them. And then they execute an experiment, and that's a scientific process. And so it's this, it's not a one-time silver bullet, it's a constant optimization. And so you're really building a machine as part of a growth operation. And so when you think about what are the questions that you want to ask in that context, the first thing that you need to do with your product insights is really just get a very deep level of understanding of what are customers doing in our product. And then you really want to understand that relative to the values that your product provides. Are they actually connecting with those experiences? How frequently are they having those experiences? And you also want to connect that with the rest of your funnel. You want to understand above there, are they connecting with the right channels, the right sources? How do those channels and sources actually impact the behaviors and experiences they have? Because it's your responsibility as part of a growth team to drive change that better gets customers into that kind of that golden path, the right experience, so that they're understanding the value. So once you have that context, you're going to ask then, I need to take an action. I want to drive growth in the right direction. And so you need to connect the behaviors that they're taking to the outcomes you really, really care about. And that's what helps you prioritize, because you're trying to understand, what is the reach? Is this going to hit a lot of our users? Is this going to be a high impact type of feature? Are we confident that this feature is actually going to be, or this experiment that we're going to launch is really going to drive the bottom line, or whatever particular needle you care about? And so Amplitude helps you connect to those outcomes and really say, hey, users who do these things, I can understand what that means relative to retention or engagement or conversion or revenue. Or inversely, you can look at churn or abandonment. So that's sort of that next level, and then that helps you actually say, I'm going to execute on an experiment. So once you do that, then you say, all right, we did an experiment, what happened? And it's really critical that you close the loop at this part, because you need to learn. Not every experiment is going to be successful. And so you're building a foundation of understanding as a growth team to know, okay, I have this level of understanding about our users. We made this product change to hopefully drive some behavior in the right direction. Did it actually move that behavior in the right direction? Or did something else happen? And being able to ask those questions quickly is incredibly important. There's a big velocity component to doing growth right as you think about this optimization process. So the challenge with a lot of product analytics today is that, it's not a good fit. A lot of analytics tools just don't do the job that they need to do. They don't let you ask the questions easily or quickly, or sometimes not even at all. And so many of us have experience with some of these other kind of verticals within the analytics space, but there really is something specifically for understanding the users of your product, and you need to fill that gap if you want to execute on growth correctly. So, let's think through some of the related problems that we see today with some of these, not just other tools, but the processes. When your growth team isn't quite humming yet, you're going to see something like a data breadline. And so you want to figure out, how can I get very quick answers to these critical questions, these understandings, whether it's at the phase where you're trying to develop a hypothesis to know what you can execute against, or whether it's post-experiment and you're trying to understand the impact. But you need to get to these understandings quickly. And with a traditional flow where you're writing SQL queries against a data warehouse, it's really slow. So you need to execute faster, and you want to execute really complex questions. You want to understand at a deep level what your customers are doing. So why Amplitude? So essentially, if you think about growth, it's a very cross-functional type of operation. You have a lot of stakeholders, both within your organization and then your peer teams. And everybody needs to be on the same page. Those of us who've been in large organizations know getting alignment is a huge deal. And so you need to have a tool that allows everyone to self-service, and so they can easily understand the same trends that you're understanding. It's not enough for you solo to understand these things. You need to communicate the success or failures and learnings that your growth team is making to the rest of these teams. And Amplitude is a tool that does a very good job of helping more than just your growth team, but also your peers. The other big important part about Amplitude relative to some of the other options in analytics is that you can get down to a deeper level. I think a lot of us have, KPI dashboards floating around. Maybe they're on TV monitors in your office, but those don't get you to where you need to be to execute properly on growth, to drive the kind of experiments that are actually going to leverage and give you retention or engagement or conversion or revenue. And so if you think about going one step deeper, you try and see, hey, from a mirror, I've got that funnel view. But then you want to double click even again, because it's not enough to just know what the drop off. You need to know what exactly happened with those people, and then other paths. How do I solve these problems? And so getting to that third tier is just an important part of actually executing on growth. And so we've been really fortunate that we've been able to help a lot of these organizations do this and be very impactful. We've got some really strong fans. So one thought leader in the growth space is a guy named Siki Chen. Siki's in San Francisco. He's part of a company called Postmates, which is an incredibly fast-growing startup that does delivery. And Siki's team operates on a data-driven basis, and they've had huge success as part of their growth operation. And so, there we go. I want to give you another example, in addition to the ones that Brian already brought to your attention on what does this look like? When you think through a literal workflow of a growth team, what does that mean? How do they use the product analytics? So I'm going to talk about a company called Intuit, and specifically their product called QuickBooks. So QuickBooks is basically a small business platform. There are a lot of different capabilities. It's really powerful product. And fundamentally, it's around accounting. And then more recently, they've started to introduce features so that you can do invoicing and payments. And you really can close the loop as part of just running your small business on top of QuickBooks. Now, the problem is they were not seeing tremendous success initially with their invoicing product. So customers were generating invoices, but those invoices weren't getting paid. They weren't getting emailed to customers. So they used Amplitude to realize that they had this problem. So that's that level one, starting to get in that level two. And so they needed to understand, hey, what can we do that's going to be impactful? And they realized this gap was something that really had high potential to drive growth for their organization and their business. And so what they identified was that a lot of customers were using Gmail, and they happened to have a correlation with folks who were not actually sending the invoices. And so they identified, hey, we have a gap in our integrations with sending Gmail. And so this is a classic way of identifying an experiment you can execute on to see, hey, could this drive growth? And so they got all of these insights, and then they were able to execute on such an experiment. Well, it turns out this was a success story. This was quite a successful story. And I want to highlight one thing, that although this is a success story, this is an iterative process, and you don't always get, that silver bullet huge landing, but it's about that velocity, and it's going through this cycle again and again and again. And so the role of product analytics and Amplitude is helping you identify how those experiments did and getting you to actually developing those potential experiments. And that's what you use that for. But then now I'm going to pass it over to David, who's going to talk about how do you actually execute on those things as a growth team. And so I'll just pass it off.
Thanks a lot, Carter. I'm just going to take over presentation. Excellent. And I'm going to talk to you about how analytics and experimentation work as a virtuous cycle to really help you drive growth in your organization. And I think one thing that Carter said that's really important is that it is an iterative process. And not every test you run is going to yield major impact to your metrics. Sometimes actually the thing you test will perform worse, or sometimes it'll perform the same. And so, but in all these cases, the running the experiments, analyzing into optimizely, looking at the more downstream metrics and Amplitude are going to help you make better decisions, and it's going to allow you to be more innovative because you're willing to take a little more risk because you have the system in place to really help you understand whether the features or products you're building are better. And one point I want to hit on that I think was really clear in Brian's presentation is that really this growth is a cross-functional job, and there's not one team that's going to solely influence it. Even when there's a growth team, that team is going to be working with a number of teams to help drive growth of the product of the business. And it's going to start with building a great product or experience, and this will be driven by product and engineering, but you're going to be insights coming from marketing and research, and both sort of the quant and qual. You're going to have marketing driving awareness of these products through campaigns and website, updating the landing pages with key powerful messages. And then once you've built these product and marketing experiences, you have the analytics team that are going to be helping you understand how they're performing, both from a product and marketing funnel perspective. And that's where tools like Amplitude are so key at getting to the crux of what's going on in the user's behavior. And you can find these sort of key areas of opportunity. And then where experimentation comes in is really both product and marketing owners or growth owners are developing hypotheses to see how you can improve these experiments. And whether it's doing A/B testing or controlled rollouts, it's a great way to validate your ideas before they go to everyone. And so, I want to talk a little bit about how Optimizely fits into the modern growth stack. We help both business and product development teams develop hypotheses and run and analyze their experiments. And as Brian mentioned, we had a product, Optimizely Web Experimentation, that helped marketers and business users run experiments on their websites in a fast, powerful way using a visual interface. But within the sort of last year and a half, we launched Optimizely Full Stack, and that's a solution for product teams that allows you to go much deeper by experimenting in your actual code across server, mobile, web applications, and you can optimize on application logic, such as the effect of a new feature or how you optimize a search or pricing algorithm. And really, it enables you to experiment on any platform where someone's connected to the internet. And one of the key things here is, as part of that iterative loop, it's the real-time results and that have statistical significance. So we build a stats engine in conjunction with Stanford University that gives you always valid real-time results about how your experiment's performing. And it's going to allow you to run experiments and iterate faster. And, Carter mentions the bread line for waiting for insights and data. And typically, we see these products as complementary to the work your data scientists are already doing, and they actually enable your data scientists to go faster and use these tools to serve for the initial analysis, and then they can go even more advanced analyses. And the key thing is, tools like Optimizely and Amplitude actually provide these APIs to send the data to and from them, and then you can pull in data from Optimizely into a tool like Amplitude to understand the long-term impacts. So, and when we're thinking about this virtuous cycle, I like to think of it sort of as you analyze, you hypothesize, and you experiment. And if you're familiar with the lean startup concept, there's a sort of idea of building a minimum viable product, getting it into the hands of your customers fast so you can validate you're building the right thing. And I say the lean startup is really great about finding your product market fit and validating your business idea. But this virtuous cycle, I think, is almost one sort of level below that. And it's really, once you have a business that's running, how do you grow it? And where are the opportunities? And this virtuous cycle of analyze, hypothesize, experiment should really be a core part of your modern growth stack. And once you've used sort of the lean startup or other methods to sort of validate the overall business, you really need to iterate constantly, and this is a tool to help you iterate constantly. And in terms of what it means is you're going to use a tool like Amplitude to really analyze and monitor your core metrics. You're going to look for drop off in terms of your funnels, but then you're also going to you can use those tools, use a tool like Amplitude to really understand and almost predict things like retention and lifetime value, and see how certain core metrics affect those. And that's really where you're able to then hypothesize experiments that you can do to improve that. And so some of those may be on your product side, some of those may be messaging tests. And once you go ahead and run those experiments, some will win, some will lose, but you can actually really make smart product decisions about whether you want to launch a feature or whether you want to roll it back and iterate on it some more. And so I'll give you an example of a customer that uses Optimizely and how they're using sort of a modern growth stack to drive their product experience. And they started off, this company is called Tripping.com. They're a meta search site for vacation rentals for places like VRBO and Airbnb. And they start off using an open source testing framework for server-side testing. But running those tests were painful, and part of the reason was they spent a lot of time setting up the tests because they didn't have a great documentation or knowledge of that system. And then the data breadline issue kept coming up. Their analysts were tracking down data discrepancies and working with engineers to fix the analytics pipeline and integration. And so it was slowing them down. And so they decided to switch over to Optimizely Full Stack to help them kind of conquer this issue. And so if we look at the virtuous cycle, again, for a company like Tripping.com, we can talk about they're looking in their analytics and they're going to say analyze their booking conversion funnel. And so they could see that maybe it's not converting as high as they want to. And then they can go ahead and come up with some hypotheses. And so one hypothesis they came up with is actually adding some additional context and adding an additional step in their flow might help drive more bookings on these third-party sites. And it might seem a little counterintuitive to add more friction to the flow, but what they did was they added this sort of listing page, which is the third image you see on the right side, that kind of mimicked the experience customers would be seeing once they clicked out, as a way to kind of give more context before the customer left that site. And so, you know, they had that hypothesis and then they ran it as an actual experiment. And, you know, they used Optimizely to split the traffic, to analyze the results. And, you know, the big insight they had here was they actually increased revenue. Even though they ended up decreasing the conversion rate of people that clicked out, the actual people that converted on that third-party site was higher because it turned out that adding that additional context was super valuable in terms of helping their customer make the decision on their third-party sites. And so I think, you know, one really key thing here is that without experimentation, without robust analytics, it's a product feature that they might have not had confidence in building. It seems kind of counterintuitive, add more friction to the funnel. But it turned out in this case that this was actually a test that paid dividends to their bottom line. And I think, you know, the last thing I want to leave you with today before we get to questions is that when you adopt a modern growth stack, it's not just better tooling. It's actually something that inspires you with more confidence to make bigger bets and be bolder, because you have the confidence that you're making the right decision because it's being informed by data. And that data is coming to you in real time, and it gives you the ability to quickly change the better experience, or if it turns out you made the wrong bet, to flip it back. And at the end of the day, adopting a modern growth stack is really going to help you accelerate your business because it gives you the insight and controls to make smarter product decisions. So thank you so much for listening to our webinar. And we're going to be very shortly, you know, taking some questions and answering those. So the first question we have, this is for Brian, is can you contact your test user? So I think it's specifically about using a tool like usertesting.io. So Brian, I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you contact them? Yes, you can. It was actually one of the critical reasons we were using usertest.io. You know, without us being able to contact them, we would not have been able to kind of get down to the root problem at hand that was causing that drop in the funnel. So we did exchange a few emails. We did pick up the phone and give them a buzz. We ended up doing a screen sharing session. And because of that, that's where we could sort out where that ad blocker technology was making the buttons on our website not work and preventing end users to go through our funnel. So without being able to contact them, we would not have been able to get to that root problem. So that's why it was a tremendous value.
Great. I think that's super important. I think that's such a powerful tool in your arsenal, not just sort of using the quantitative tools, but that qualitative research and insights is so important.
Exactly. Exactly.
Next question also for Brian is, if you have, say, a skeptical team, you know, you in your organization, you want to help move your organization to, you know, sort of best in breed solutions and move to a modern growth stack. How would you help sort of a reluctant leaders in your organization how would you persuade them?
Yeah, great question. You know, that question is very, very near and dear to my heart, because it's actually what I've been spending most of my time at Cisco doing for the past 2 years. So, you know, historically, Cisco has a very strong background in hardware, and over the years making this transition to software. And because of that, you do have to make this philosophical change to new disciplines to you know, make sure that you do have the right philosophical mindset in place to have these modern technologies within the organization. And for us, you know, what ends up resonating the most is come with the data. You know, come with the data, show them what's going on. You know, all you need is a very small, poignant, isolated example of where these technologies are providing value, or these techniques. And so with that, you know, if you're coming with your opinion, they're probably going to shrug their shoulders. If you're coming with data, they're going to lean in and get a little bit more curious. And that's how we built a lot of transition in Cisco. 2 years ago, I was the only person with growth in my title. Fast forward about a year and a half, there's over 100 people on our growth team today at Cisco. So there are challenges, but it can be done. And as long as you're beating the drum and staying consistent in your messaging, you can do a lot of change.
Wow, I think that's really powerful. And I think, you know, hopefully we've given you, as part of this webinar, some examples of companies that real ways companies are using these tools to better their business, and you can go back to your organization with that data and help make the case for your own uses. We have a couple more questions. One question for Carter is, when you're thinking about product analytics, and if you were setting up a solution like Amplitude, you know, where would you start in terms of, are there every business has some specific needs, but are there some universal metrics that you'd want to make sure your business was tracking if you were going ahead and setting up a tool like Amplitude?
Sure. I think as far as universal metrics, it's hard to be that prescriptive. I think everyone in this call who's on a growth team, hopefully, if you haven't figured out a North Star metric yet, I highly encourage you to figure out what is the output you're trying to drive towards. Some of the ones I referenced were conversion, retention, revenue, stickiness, engagement. Stickiness is usually like how many days of the week or whatever interval month that they're using your product. And I think the actual best thing to track, so that's almost a given, is that you're tracking whatever the output you're trying to drive towards. The even more valuable thing for you to be considering what you should track are what are the inputs to that. And that's getting that extra level down, but that's what's actually actionable. If you think about the experiments that you want to drive, you want to figure out, okay, what is something that I really can influence? And it's difficult frequently to directly push your output metric. You know, let's say you're optimizing against retention. It can be tough to do that directly. And so frequently a more tractable thing to do is pick an input metric from an insight that you have that you know drives retention. So a suggestion would be figure out what your product's respective ladder of engagement is, and what's the sequence of steps they need to go through in order to realize the value of your product. And then that's something that you can, as a growth team, drive experiments towards and say, hey, look, you know, we are doing an okay job of getting them to maybe rung 2 on the ladder, or maybe we're doing a poor job of rung 1. And so the metric to track is really specifically something actionable that you know connects to that output metric. And that's usually something high value, and there's a lot of virtuous alignment when you pick a high impact input metric instead of just you know, myopically focusing on whatever your ultimate output is.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, and I think that's, to me, you know, one of the most exciting things about sort of Amplitude and Compass is that it's really helping you identify what some of those key input metrics are. So,
hey guys, this is Brian. Can I add on one thing that I think is super awesome about Carter's point? All the points that Carter was making, completely hitting the nail on the head. One thing that I would definitely highlight is the notion of speed, because Carter is saying, hey, you know, get the right outputs, get the right measures in place so you can understand retention. Well, it used to be super hard to understand that and take a long process to do that. With Amplitude, it's much more easy and quicker to get that, which was not possible just a few years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. So our last question of our webinar is, for me, it's in terms of, for Optimizely, why would you want to use sort of a more complex code-based solution with Optimizely full stack versus sort of Optimizely web, which is more of a easy to use visual editor solution. And what I'd say is I think a lot of this is driven by trying to optimize your entire funnel, from sort of your top of the funnel marketing to your actual in-product experience. And most businesses today are building products that are inherently cross-platform. So they have a website, it's both on desktop, mobile, web. They have mobile apps. They're even testing new platforms like messaging bots or voice assistant like Amazon Alexa. And so our Optimizely web solution is great for sort of optimizing your front end web experience. But when you want to go deeper, either on sort of the logic that's powering that experience, or move into these other technologies and these other platforms that your users are on, like mobile or like chatbots, you really need a code-based solution. And using something like a server-based solution allows you actually, in some cases, to write a test that's going to impact multiple devices, right? So you can write and say your backend language, and that test is going to go ahead and may impact your users on your website, you impact your users on your mobile app. And that's really part of, delivering a full omni-channel experience. You need to be able to optimize across all those channels. So that's kind of the main reason. So with that, I think we are just double checking our questions. I think one other question came in that was, someone was unable to join earlier. Will there be a recorded link sent out? Yes. This sort of, my closing thoughts are, thank you everyone for joining. We're going to send out a link with the recording and slides very shortly after the webinar concludes. So thank you everyone for your time. I hope you enjoyed learning about how you can introduce the modern growth stack to your business to drive innovation and growth.